Well, she, as in just a little story which has her signature on it, pretty much, was a one-source story and quoted most of the talking points. I understand, led to a lot of calls or emails to some of the local congressional people, and that there was going to be a major pushback on this. So, in today's paper, there is a long letter from Brian Bin of the Chamber of Commerce, who's sort of their head, military booster, and he has a long letter in there that is basically repeating talking points type stuff, leaving out most of the hard questions, relying again on kind of this estimate kind of thing that is so prevalent in that study. And then he has a thing in there to cover the law enforcement problem, that there is one, by saying, well, the cops said there isn't one, An anecdote, he talked to a couple of cops and they said this is not a problem. But no digging for statistics, which we had kind of asked for in that talking point thing. Then I then wrote a letter to the editor, and I don't know if I'm going to put it in, but in the meantime, after that, I get a call from the main editorial writer, Wayne Lawison. We talked for about a half hour, and I knew he was going to throw me under the bus, so to speak, I could tell. So he then has an editorial, which will be in tomorrow's paper, again, sort of saying that we don't know what we're talking about, and introducing it by calling me a peace activist. And so that then discredited anything else I might have to say. So that's kind of, all the way up to date to where we are now, I guess, in terms of where this stands. Yeah.
Just real quick on the EIS thing. I mean,
yeah.
It sounds to me like the EIS was designed for a different proposal that didn't happen, and the Combat Aviation Brigade was tacked on as a maybe something, and it only seems fair that if they actually have a new proposal, that there needs to be a new EIS.
Yeah, but that EIS thing, that's a chicken and egg thing where you just get to deal with the egg. You can't, once they decide they're going to do it, it is rarely possible, sometimes with a real heavy legal challenge, to actually stop it and not just delay it.
That's because it's the Army?
Huh?
I mean, if I were developing Banning Lewis Ranch,
yeah,
and I had an EIS, and then somebody else came in and said, well, we're going to develop something different out there, we're going to put a shopping center in it, I'd have to do something completely new if I were private sector. Right?
Yeah.
But your experience is that
with the
military is exempt from.
I don't know if the civilian sector has the equivalent of FONSI or not. I don't think they do. Where you have a finding of no significant impact, and then you fill in the blanks.
Yeah, the EIS can say we found no significant impacts.
Yeah.
There's therefore
that's
no
usually
mitigation.
how they start off.
But it seems like any project anybody has to put in has to do an environmental impact.
Yeah.
Unless what you're telling me is that the Army doesn't, but everyone else does.
I mean, I remember Bill White, who used to be a professor here. We talked about that process, and he talked about those things just come off the shelf. And if you read them, if you read one, you've read them all. Sort of, they have certain categories, and then, kind of at the end of them, they say if they've surfaced a problem, they say this is how we'll mitigate it, and we can mitigate it. And I mean, this is a guy that had looked at a lot of these EISs that are military related. I don't know if, I can't speak to the Banning Lewis Ranch, but to how military EISs tend to happen. First of all, they happen after the decision's made, and in theory, the decision could be unmade if your EIS really, I mean really surfaces something that is, they find, I suppose if they found a big oil well out there, they'd change their mind. But it's extremely rare that you don't get just perhaps a delay because you made a good question.
Well, if I can just jump in.
Right.
My experience is covering non-military
Yeah.
environmental review. And all the environmental review does is identify significant impacts and
Right.
how they might be mitigated.
Yeah.
And the elected officials can vote any way they want. So
Yeah.
it doesn't guarantee anything,
Yeah.
but a public process where all relevant environmental information is out in the public.
Yeah.
Public can come and testify. City council or county commissioners, whoever they are, can still say,
Yeah.
we love the project, we don't
That's right.
care, we picked mitigation A, B, and C.
Yeah,
and it's
you're
done."
making me even more depressed. You're saying. I mean,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
the thing I don't understand when it gets to government and the military is who the deciders are.
yeah,
Because in a civilian project, we know who the deciders are. They're gonna be a county board, there's gonna be a planning commission, there's gonna be a city
Yeah.
council. We know who makes the final decision, we know who elected them.
in this case, it's the U.S. Congress.
Is it?
Well, yeah, I
I mean-
mean, they could pull the plug on this, but I think you know as well as I how embedded they are in kind of the military-industrial complex and how they compete against each other for military contracts and also military bases. That's basically the argument, you know, that the Pentagon is a jobs program. This is the socialism that we love. This is the government hiring and paying for all the buildings and all the stuff that will accrue to our business community. The construction, you know, that's a big boom. But once that's over, then you're back to how the base functions day-to-day economically. And that's when you hit the kind of the point at which you need to look at it harder. Is this long-term good for our community to get so cemented into this dependence that we don't look at the hard questions that come with it. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. But the U.S. Congress, obviously, you know, they have the purse strings, but they rarely use them because of this kind of this network of I'll vote for your project if you vote for mine, and back and forth. Sometimes you get heavy competition for a base, but usually the trade-offs are if we don't give you something, you'll get something else. I mean, it's anyway. Joanne, you had a question.
It's okay, this is a little bit broader than just the one brigade. But has anyone ever done real research on what all these extra people do to the infrastructure of the city and its surroundings? Because, you know, it's hard for me to believe that it isn't a major factor in the destruction of the streets, the
Sarah, do you
many
wanna
kinds
talk
of
about that?
water problems we might
Yeah.
have, and so forth.